This is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to another edition of the Quo-Cast. I think it's fair to say that status quo and charity have gone together hand in hand over the last 60 plus years, haven't they? They've done so many events and fundraising for charity. A few examples I can think of: they've done work with Nordoff Robbins, Prince's Trust, and they've also released singles for people such as Sport Aid and the re-recording of In the Army Now in 2010 as well. In addition to those records, they also collaborated with other artists on charity records, the most famous being, I suppose, Band Aid with Do They Know It's Christmas in 1984, in which Francis Rossi and Rick Parfitt, who are in the video and on the record, appear alongside a plethora of 1980s acts, including Boy George, George Michael, Duran Duran, and Spandau Ballet, among many, many others. That's the big famous one. But I was very surprised recently when I went on to Francis Rossi's Discogs profile, and it shows all the things that he's worked on or been involved in. And I was surprised to see that 15 years after Band Aid, he and Rick Parfitt appeared on a charity record in 1999 for Children's Promise on a cover of the Rolling Stones 70s classic, It's Only Rock and Roll, But I Like It. And after some searching on eBay, I just had to pick up the 2 CD single that came out in December of 1999. So this was just before the millennium came in, and this was part of the Millennium Final Hour appeal. And when you go onto the back of the disc, it says, in partnership with Bernardo's, Children in Need, Childline, the Children's Society, Comic Relief, NCH Action for Children, and the NSPCC. That's Children's Promise in partnership with all of these very well-respected organizations. So what is this record? Well, basically, it's in the mold of Perfect Day, the BBC record from a couple of years previously for Children in Need. It's in the mold of Band Aid and all of those things. It has so many artists in here. I mean, I'm going to attempt to read out all of the artists that are here. There's probably more that I'm missing out. So we've got artists in order of appearance: Keith Richards, Kid Rock, Mary J. Blige, Kelly Jones of Stereophonics, John Bon Jovi, Kelly Bryan, J.K. of Jamiroquai, Ozzy Osbourne, Womack and Womack, Lionel Richie, Bonnie Raitt, Dolores O'Riordan of the Cranberries, apologies if I've mispronounced that, James Brown, the Spice Girls, Mick Jagger, Robin Williams, Jackson Browne, Iggy Pop, Chrissie Hynde, Skin of Skunk Anansi. Apologies if I've pronounced that incorrectly. Annie Lennox, Mark Owen, Natalie Imbruglia, Huey, Fun-Loving Criminals, Dina Carroll, Gavin Rossdale of Bush, B.B. King, Joe Cocker, The Cause, Steve Craddock and Simon Fowler of Ocean Colour Scene, Ronan Keating, Ray Barretto, Herbie Hancock, Francis Rossi and Rick Parfitt of Status Quo, S Club 7, and Eric Idle. I mean, that really is a huge range of different artists spanning loads of genres. It is possibly one of the most impressive lists of artists ever assembled together on a record. So after discovering this song, I went on to YouTube and looked up the video, which is available because of a little innovation that was happening in the late 90s, where they used to put on the single as like a little bonus incentive the music video into like a CD-ROM thing. So you could put it in your computer and you'd see the video in relatively low quality, but for the time it was like, wow, to be able to see this. And the video itself is very interesting because you see all these different artists that are involved in this. And I must say, really, coming on to, I think, the objective part of this review of this charity single, it's for an amazing cause, an amazing cause. It was coming up to the millennium, all of these charities and Children's Promise in partnership with one another, raising money. This, is one of those things where it's like, that's good. I'll get on to the actual song itself. So the production is very contemporary. It's the song, it's only rock and roll, but it's a very contemporary thing. It's got kind of a modern, for 1999, rhythm in there. We've got sort of lots of sampley, referencey things in there to different rock and roll songs. I notice at the end there's one for Bubba O'Reilly by The Who, and other things like that. It feels a little bit of a jumble on first listen because you've got so many artists packed in there, and it is in the mold of some of those previous ones where people sing a line and stuff, but sometimes you've got two completely different kinds of artists singing in each ear, and it gets a little bit confusing from that perspective. I must say, though, personally, listening after 2 or 3 times, once I knew those changes were coming in the track, which is quite fast, it did get better with each listen, and you did get more into it. But I do think that when you're listening to the radio, if you heard that on first listen, I don't think you'd be particularly impressed. Now, this song reached 19 in the UK singles charts. I think it charted in Europe too, and other parts of the world, because the amount of artists that are on it is really, really impressive. So many names in there. I mean, to get James Brown, B.B. King, and lots of artists of that stature. I mean, there's literally a little bit of everything in there, isn't there? You've got your current day artists, your S Club 7 and your Spice Girls, and then you've got ones from the past. I mean, Rick and Francis kind of come in to that category, certainly in the UK and around Europe. And then you've got some younger ones in there that were going to just about, just come into their own, I would say. And this, from that point of view, it is really an impressive feat. The production, though, the music's good. The way in which it's been laid out at first sight can be a little bit on the jumbled side. I think so. Anyway, now, you might be asking, well, why is it that I've never heard of this single if Francis and Rick are on it? Well, when you watch the video, they are in about 2 seconds. Usually, if someone's got a line, you see them, and this was recorded all over the place. It was recorded on tour buses in different studios, including Abbey Road. And this is lots of people in there singing a line. Francis and Rick, in the actual radio edit of the video, are only in like 2 seconds playing guitar with some children in there. They don't appear to feature vocally on the record. They might be playing something in the backing track. I'm not sure. There isn't any credit for that. It just says featuring. They could be. It goes a little bit Quo-y at the end, just a little bit. So they might be playing on that backing track. I don't know. That's something I'd have to ask Francis, I guess. However, on CD 2 of the single, there is a full-length version, which is a minute or two longer. So the normal radio edit is about 4 minutes and 49 seconds. and the full-length version is 6 minutes and 30 seconds. And there is a tiny bit where I think you hear Francis come in with just one line, like "I like it," one of those phrases, and then you hear him in full stereo say, "You still like it, don't you?" or something like that. I'm sure it's Francis. It certainly sounds like Francis to me. That's probably why you haven't heard too much about it. I'm sure Rick is in there in the mix too. I mean, there's just so much going on with different phrases being called out, different lines, very short lines, and there's just a lot. In addition to the single and full-length version, we've also got very 1999 mixes of the track, remixes. Fats and Small contribute something to it. Arthur Baker is also involved elsewhere. So you might be asking, why would Rick and Francis be asked to participate in this thing, which has a lot of modern artists in it? They'd done the pub tour that year, they'd done the albums and stuff, but they weren't exactly like high mainstream. No, but back in 1984, I believe one of the reasons that Bob Geldof asked Rick and Francis to be part of it was because they added a level of legitimacy from the rock world, if you will, a little bit of credibility from the rock world because these two people were in it. And of course, we have such a big fan base as well. We'd buy that record because they were on it. And so I believe certainly that 15 years later, from the organizers' point of view, they are long established, veterans of the music world who have a large fan base and probably add a bit of credibility, as well as like James Brown and B.B. King and like these iconic people, Herbie Hancock from the jazz world. There's so many artists here that you could put into that very similar camp, I think. This is one of those things that's sort of been swept under the carpet in time. It's available on YouTube, but not really much anywhere else, as is the nature, I think, with these charity records. Did you know that this existed? Please do let me know. Did you buy it at the time? What did you think of it? These are just my thoughts on this. I did not know this existed. I must say, like I say, after a few listens, I was rocking out to it. I got what they were up to. And for me, I found it quite nostalgic because I grew up with like the pop side of popular music, in the late 90s, Spice Girls and S Club 7, etc. And some of these voices is like, well, these are people I heard, my sister play in the next room or whatever. So yeah, very nostalgic from that point of view. And once again, a little bit like the Scooter record that Quo made in the late 2000s. They were part of something that was current and contemporary. And that is, I think, something that often gets overlooked, that Quo continued to be part of the mainstream, even when, as a wide thing, I don't think you could quite consider that. Like, they were still there. They're still on TV. They're still on radio. They're still around. And even now, even now with newspaper articles and stuff, people are still talking about them. And I think maybe more people should talk about this too, because this was done, for a good purpose. And so hopefully I've spread the word just a little bit that Rick Francis and a plethora of other artists from across the decades took part in a cover of the Rolling Stones' It's Only Rock and Roll, but I like it. And I certainly like that sentiment.